OpenAI on the cusp of entering the web browser game. A new subsea cable landing station to be built in Florida. Click to cancel ends before it can get started. Spectrum Auctioning Authority restored to the FCC. And a net neutrality bill becomes law in Maine without the governor's signature. Those stories and more on This Week in the Broadband universe. Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Craig Corbett. There's about to be a new player in the web browser game, and it's a biggie. OpenAI will soon release an AI-powered web browser, setting up a huge head-to-head battle with market behemoth Google Chrome. According to Reuters, the browser will include chat interface and enable AI agent integrations. The launch, expected in the next few weeks, certainly intensifies OpenAI's head-to-head competition with Google in the AI race. OpenAI's browser could well put pressure on Google's ad business, which is virtually 75% of revenue for Alphabet. OpenAI's browser reportedly designed to keep some user interactions within a ChatGPT-like native chat interface instead of clicking through to websites. A bill establishing net neutrality standards in Maine has become law without being signed by Governor Janet Mills. In Maine, if the state legislature is in session after sending an adopted bill to the governor and the legislation sits on the desk for 10 days without signature, it becomes law. The 2025 Maine net neutrality legislation expands on a similar bill that was adopted in 2019 to include all internet service providers operating in the state. All platforms and websites must be treated equally without blocking, throttling, or paid prioritization. Observers have noted that the law might well be difficult to enforce. Federal Trade Commission's click to cancel rule has been kicked to the curb. In a move seen as a big win for large cable providers, the 8th Circuit U.S. Court of Appeals in St. Louis on Tuesday vacated the FTC's new mandate requiring businesses to make cancellation of subscription services just as easy as the process to sign up. The rule had drawn immediate condemnation from the cable industry. The Court of Appeals found that no preliminary regulatory analysis of the rule's costs and benefits had been conducted by the FTC. Now, that process is required for all rules and regulations that would incur an annual impact on the U.S. economy in excess of $100 million. Click to cancel had originally been slated to go into effect May 14th, but the FTC pushed that out 60 days due to the complexity of compliance. Legal authority to once again auction spectrum has been restored to the Federal Communications Commission. It was included in the recently passed One Big Beautiful Bill, an order for the Assistant Secretary of Commerce to identify a minimum of 800 megahertz of spectrum between 1.3 gigahertz and 10.3 gigahertz to be sold. Only 100 megahertz in the upper C-band was actually specified in the legislation. Target for how much should be raised in those auctions? At least $85 billion. The C-band auction will have to be conducted within the next 2 years. The bill did, however, provide 2 exceptions for the Department of Defense spectrum bands, which cannot be auctioned or reallocated, 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz, along with the 7.4 to 8.4 gigahertz X-band spectrum, which is used for defense satellite systems. A new CLS will soon be built in Florida. DC Blocks, one of the leading providers of connected data centers, this week announcing plans to build a second subsea cable landing station campus in Palm Coast, Florida. The facility will be designed to provide global access, supporting 5 additional subsea cables that will land in Flagler Beach, Florida, with terrestrial connection to the CLS campus in Palm Coast. Anchoring the facility, the recently announced high-capacity SOL cable connecting Palm Coast to Bermuda, the Azores, and Spain. This marks Florida's first direct connection to Europe since 1999. In a related story, Luma Technologies announcing plans to supply terrestrial backhaul via dark fiber for the Juno Trans-Pacific cable system. The high-capacity Juno undersea cable spanning 6,200 miles connecting Japan to the U.S. The Juno cable designed to deliver up to 350 terabits per second using advanced space division multiplexing across 20 pairs. AT&T has sold its remaining 70% stake in DirecTV to TPG Capital. The deal also includes the Uverse platform. While there's no word on how much TPG Capital paid, AT&T did expect to report an additional $7.6 billion in cash payments once the stake in DirecTV was sold. Charter Communications is now calling the June 15th attack on its network infrastructure an act of domestic terrorism. 13 fiber cables, including more than 2,600 individual fibers, were severed in vandalism, creating an outage in the Los Angeles neighborhood of Van Nuys. Redundancy to emergency services, police and fire, emergency dispatch, and 911 communications services, along with a U.S. military base, were impacted. More than 50,000 residential customers were without service for more than a day. Google set to fork over $2.4 billion to license technology from AI coding startup Windsurf. They'll also hire its CEO and a number of employees. The deal comes after negotiations for OpenAI to acquire Windsurf stalled. OpenAI had a deal to buy the startup for $3 billion, but didn't want to give their largest investor, Microsoft, access to Windsurf's technology. And finally, the tentative agenda for the FCC's July Open Commission meeting includes consideration of an AWS.3 spectrum auction, truth in billing rules, and accelerating the upgrade away from old copper line networks. Also on the docket, a notice of proposed rulemaking to promote broadband infrastructure deployment by establishing a timeline for large pole attachment requests, a move that would ensure greater collaboration between utilities and ISPs. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time on This Week in the Broadband Universe.